Hi, I'm Cameron, and I don't just read comics. I love them. Welcome back to another episode of Cameron Reads Comics. So I was looking at my comic book collection, and I was thinking about, within fandom and nerd community, there's certain comic books that have redefined the medium. Watchmen, plenty of others. And that being the case, they've changed everything. And I've read a lot of comics. I'm a self-proclaimed comic book nerd. But that doesn't mean I've read all of them. So I just wanted to make a list and totally be vulnerable about the comics that I have not read, that people would tell you are mandatory reading. Here is my list of comics that I should have read by now, but I haven't. Okay, starting off the list, I have a bunch of work by Alan Moore. Alan Moore is one of the most luminary comic book creators of all time, most notably writer of Watchmen, writer of V for Vendetta, writer of, one of the best Swamp Thing runs in history. So let's just go through and talk about what I haven't read by him. I have 3, which now that I'm writing, now that I'm on camera, my list only grows. I'm like, oh. And also there's a statute of limitation of what we actually think is mandatory reading. Here are the 3 Alan Moore titles I should have read by now, but I have not. Number 1, Alan Moore's Saga of the Swamp Thing. I have read like 1 issue of this run, and that was obviously Anatomy Lesson. So I think that's the first Swamp Thing book that he ever did. Obviously, Swamp Thing is just a character I want to get to know better anyways. So even I'd pick up the omnibus just for the Len Wein, Byrne Wrightson stuff, because I'd love to get into more horror comics. I really loved Lock and Key. I really loved. I'm loving Something's Killing the Children. So that being the case, I should hop on and I should read some of that. So Saga of the Swamp Thing is something I really want to pick up. Especially, I love Vertigo. So Vertigo coming in and changing everything, and that kind of being the flagship book for that movement, I want to read. Next up, by him, we have Miracle Man / Marvel Man. I have read half of the first trade. I just couldn't get into it, which is funny because that character is supposed to be kind of like Shazam for that universe. And like Donny Cates is so influenced by it and just all these things. And, I just have not been able to get into Miracle Man. But that being said, they have now announced an omnibus of the original collection. And I think I'm definitely going to go pick that up. I have the first trade. I think I'm going to sell it, go buy the omnibus so I can have all those stories and just read them as soon as possible. Now, the last Alan Moore book I haven't read is unfortunately V for Vendetta. That is one I'm actually kicking myself about. I have no judgment on Alan Moore. I think he's a divisive comic book creator, but I think that he's someone who's been scorned by the industry. And a lot of people want to tell you about his philosophies, his nature. I don't know. I've never had a conversation with the guy. I just know that a lot of the works that I have read by him are some of the greatest stories I've ever read. Those being For the Man Who Has Everything, the classic Superman tale, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, Watchmen. I love his work. So that being the case, I should have read these by now, and I have not. Next up is actually another Vertigo creation. And this one, I'm very surprised I haven't read by now. I just haven't picked it up. And then the whole fantasy dream part of it makes it, I don't know how bad I want to read it. I don't know anything going on in that universe. And also none of that has had its fingerprints on anything that I'm reading or talking about. So that would be Neil Gaiman's Sandman. I have never read Neil Gaiman's Sandman. That is a story that, it seems long. It seems like, have you seen the Absolute editions, the 7 volumes of the Absolutes? That just look huge. And I'm like, oh my gosh, am I even going to understand this? I know that comic book changed everything. I know that, again, one of the main Vertigo publishing books to bring in independent comics. I know he's won numerous awards. I know it's now going to be a Netflix series. I don't know if that's going to be good. The last superhero Netflix series I watched got canceled. So I don't know. I've never read it. I want to read it. Yeah, I don't know how bad I want to read it. Nah. Well, I promise I will read it. I'll get there one day, just not anytime soon. Okay, now I have some big Marvel heavy hitters that I have not read yet. Number 1 which I own but I haven't read, is The Fantastic Four by John Byrne. I'm really getting into the Fantastic Four right now. I have the early Stan Lee, Jack Kirby stuff, and I've read some of the keys from that, and I really loved it. Loved the Mark Waid run. I really enjoyed Ultimate Fantastic Four. Currently loving Dan Slott's Fantastic Four run. Love the Fantastic Four. John Byrne is supposed to be the one that redefined the entire franchise. It brought in one of my favorite characters, She-Hulk. I own both the Omnibus collection, so I literally have the full run. I just have not gotten around to reading it. So that is, some people wouldn't say that's like, wow, that's so shocking, or some people may not have even had the exposure to that run. That was one where I kick myself about, because I feel like it's in that Bronze Age Marvel that everyone loves and talks about. So there's that one. Number 2 is Thor by Walt Simonson. This is another one that I own, but I haven't quite... I read the first, I even have the first appearance of Beta Ray Bill, CGC graded, and like, I love the influence of Walt Simonson. I love Throg. I have the first appearance of Throg, the Thor frog. I just happen, I don't know, I look at the omnibus and I'm like, oh, it's so heavy, and I really like the art and everything in it too, and I like the legacy it sets up, but I just couldn't get myself to read it. So there you go. There's another one. Thor by Walt Simonson I own, but I haven't even read yet. And here's the last one that should be probably pretty shocking to a lot of people. I love SpiderMan. Love him, love him, love him. I've never read the Amazing Spider-Man by David Michelini and Todd McFarlane run. That's, first appearance of Venom. I've read some of it. I think I've read Spider-Man 300 because I felt like I was supposed to. I tried 198 and 199, or 298 and 299, and I was like, man, I just couldn't get into it at all. Looked at, and it has some of my favorite covers of all time, but I'm like, nothing in there looks like compelling to me. And I know I'm wrong. I know these are classic, like, mandatory Spider-Man reads. I even read the Spider-Man, 13-issue series that Todd McFarlane did back in the day, but I never read the big omnibus. So for my last 2 categories, I have 2. One is indie comics. I already gave you some Vertigo stuff that I haven't read. The last one, there's 2. And they're franchises that I love and I've seen multiple times. These belong to the Millar world, and they are both film franchises. You may have guessed them already. Number 1, Kick-Ass. I have never read Kick-Ass by... obviously Mark Millar and John Romita Jr. I like the movies. I just haven't gotten around to it. I see it in the shops all the time. It's all over the sale racks, and I could totally pick it up. Never picked it up. Never felt like it. Next one by him. Dave Gibbons is the artist on this series. It is Kingsman: The Secret Service, which has now become like a 3-film franchise. Probably 4. I'm sure they're making a sequel to something right now, but yeah, and I love the Kingsman movies too. That's what shocks me the most, is I know that if I pick it up, it'll be dynamic, it'll be awesome. You couldn't get me to do it. And I love Dave Gibbons' art too. I just couldn't. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I haven't got myself to read that. Alrighty, I'm Cameron. I don't just read comics. I love them. These are the ones I haven't read yet. Maybe drop a comment below and let me know what of these books should be on the top of my reading list that you think is just absolutely mandatory. Please don't roast me too bad. I was totally transparent what I haven't read, because I think that's a cool part of also being a fan, is I just don't know. I don't know what I'm missing out on. So please let me know what I'm missing out on. Or maybe if you're feeling brave, go comment a run that you have not read yet, that maybe you want to, or maybe you don't want to. Cool. Make sure to clap those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you next time.